Welcome to the Think Like Amazon podcast. This is your backstage pass into the principles and processes that have powered one of the world's most influential companies. I am Jorge Luis Pando. I'm an 8-year former Amazonian with a passion for helping ambitious professionals grow their careers in a way that's both balanced and sustainable. Each episode, I will talk to leaders to uncover the insights behind their success, and more importantly, how you can apply them to grow your own career. If you're ready to think bigger, move faster, and build a lasting impact, you're in the right place. Let's dive in. For 33 episodes, Tyler Wallace hosted this podcast and brought world-renowned leaders to explore what it truly means to think like Amazon, how to build, innovate, and operate at the highest level. And now I'm officially taking over as your host, and I couldn't be more excited to continue this journey with you. But before jumping into these new conversations and fresh insights, I wanted to take a step back and really understand the foundations that Tyler built. Of course, I was a listener from before, but I decided to go back, re listen carefully, review the most popular episodes, and analyze the best lessons that I took. The interview style, the key themes, and those really cool conversations really left me a lot of learnings. But as I was going through all of this process, I realized something. You all can also benefit from many of these lessons. So then I thought, well, what better way to start this new era of the podcast than by highlighting them and sharing them with all of you? So today, I want to kick things off by paying some sort of homage to Tyler, his incredible guests, some of whom I hope I can have back again on this podcast, and all of the valuable insights that have shaped this podcast so far. So now, of course, narrowing this down was tough, but I didn't want this episode to last for so long. So to keep it short and focused, I landed on 7 key learnings from the first 33 episodes of Think Like Amazon. And I hope you enjoy this. Lesson 1 is that delivering results in the long term versus just the short term requires to bring people along with you. This one comes from Ronak Patel, who worked at Amazon for over 9 years as a director of logistics. And he shared something that really stuck with me. So, obviously, at Amazon's results matter. There's a leadership principle about delivering results. There's no surprise, like a lot of different companies. But Ronak made a key distinction here about short term results versus long term results. And the biggest takeaway is that if you want to deliver long term results, you cannot do it alone. You have to bring others with you. So he pointed out that to some degree, you have to master all of the other leadership principles um, before being able to deliver results sustainably. So things like earning others' trust, building relationships is key because you can push for short term results, short term wins. But if you don't build trust along the way, it won't last. So real success comes from what he calls sustainable leadership, where people want to work with you and not really work for you. But I think it's better if we hear it from Ronak's own words.
I actually have never sought out a role at Amazon. So once I got in, I basically focused on the task at hand, try to be the best possible in that particular role. I'm a big believer in the deliver results leadership principle. I actually have a unique stance on it, which is my stance is in order to really deliver and nail that leadership principle, you have to do all the other ones really well.
Among many other qualities, you had a good attitude throughout all of this. You mentioned the leadership principle, deliver results. And for those that are listening that might not be as familiar with that principle, Amazon defines deliver results as leaders focus on the key inputs for their business and deliver them with the right quality and in a timely fashion. Despite setbacks, they rise to the occasion and never settle. Ronak, you made a comment a moment ago that you have to do the other leadership principles well to be able to deliver results. Can you tell us a bit more about that idea, how deliver results played into your success at Amazon and how the other leadership principles interplay with it?
Yeah, so if we just stick to maybe one leadership principle, it earns trust as one of the leadership principles, right? It's like if you were to deliver results for a short period of time and that's all you focused on, you could probably do that without earning trust, but you'll probably not last very long and you'll probably burn bridges. And when you look behind yourself, there'll probably be a bunch of walls broken down, a bunch of mess that needs to be cleaned up behind you. So if you're trying to deliver results over an extended period of time, you do have to nail the earns trust piece because eventually you're going to need people, you're going to lead people. So it's not a me, myself, I situation, regardless of what role you're in. So even if you're in an individual contributor role, like a program manager role where you don't have direct reports, you're still going to have to influence other people. And the best way to influence people is earning their trust. So that's an example of how I feel that the earns trust leadership principle is an input that goes into delivering results or inventing and simplifying over time. Yes, you can benchmark. Yes, you can do the same thing over and over and get better and make incremental progress. So each one of those leadership principles, I think, goes back into delivering results.
Lesson 2. To truly be obsessed about your customers, you need to go beyond data. Jennifer Arthur, she worked at Amazon for over 16 years and she was a category leader in the e-commerce space. She, in her episode, brought up something that I was personally very surprised about when I joined Amazon about the culture, and that is how leaders are often very eager to discussing anecdotes. I mean, think about it. A company with so much data could easily disregard anecdotes, but they don't because real customer feedback holds so much more than data. It can prove it, it can disprove it, but it will give you the why behind a lot of these customer decisions. So, why don't we just hear from her and see how we can go beyond the data into customer anecdotes?
A lot of these new metrics came from a meeting or a review where somebody asked a question to try to better understand what was happening, better understand the customer experience, a data point that they saw. And then somebody from that meeting was then responsible to go pull additional data and present it in a way that produced this new metric. Is that roughly the behavior that you saw at play in these experiences?
It is, but sometimes it was also just someone on the team without the manager asking, being like, I want to better understand this, and going in themselves and digging and then bringing to leadership this new insight that they had. Amazon talks about the leadership principle of dive deep, and whether it was leadership asking the questions or individuals asking the questions where it felt like there's more that we can know and understand to be more effective. And so they would, and then we would go and try and figure it out.
I love that you brought up the dive deep principle. For anyone not familiar with it, the dive deep principle says leaders operate at all levels, stay connected to the details, audit frequently, and are skeptical when metrics and anecdote differ. No task is beneath them. I definitely saw that at Amazon where somebody would dig into something, find an insight, dig a little bit further, even if it's outside of their typical day job, and then present that to the team. And that deeper analysis resulted in a lot of these really interesting metrics and insights that we benefited from in the teams I was on. I'd also like to talk about this last piece here where it says leaders are skeptical and metric and anecdote differ. I'm curious to hear a little bit more about your time as a category leader with jewelry and watches, because the time period you were there, I think around 2012 to 2015, that was really when smartwatches were coming to market. And so there was a lot of movement happening in this category. And if I recall correctly, it was also a younger category within Amazon relative to media and electronics and some other areas. And so I imagine that you didn't have vast amounts of data and benchmarks and whatnot. Were there any examples where you saw customer experience or anecdotes differ from the data that you had? And how did you dig into that?
It's a good question. Watches during the time that I was there was really interesting because in some ways it fits very well within the Amazon playbook, but it had a lot of moving parts. I don't know if you remember the trend, they called it the boyfriend watch, where All of the watch faces were really big, and fashion watches became huge. Fossil Watch Group, their growth was flying off the charts. Michael Kors watches, if you didn't have one, you just weren't fashionable. And we had this huge surge, and then smartwatches came in. And in a lot of ways, took away from the fashion watch. And so you saw a lot of hit there. And you saw a lot of complexities of the vendors trying to determine, do they want to stay pure played or do they want to go into smartwatches? And when you look at the numbers for the Apple Watches and Samsung, they'd be crazy not to go after it. We saw that unquestionably there were a lot of people shifting to smartwatches. And interestingly, it tended to be the fashion watches customer was shifting more towards the smartwatches. But within watches, there's a huge World of Watches show in Switzerland every year. And I remember meeting with a blogger and hearing the collectors and the watch enthusiasts, for them, a smartwatch is completely counter to what they do. And the data, of course, because smartwatches was growing and much more rapid, would tell you that's not the case and you really need to shift to smartwatches. But what we found was there's definitely a niche, and these are very loyal customers. Like I remember we found data on one customer that had 93 luxury watches. Like this was their passion. This was where they spent their money. And obviously most of our business was driven more by the customers that buy Citizen watches, a good traditional middle market, reasonable priced watch company. And they continue to see very strong growth. And they were one of the companies that at the time said, we will not do a smartwatch because that's not the kind of company we are. And the person who's buying the Apple Watch isn't the person who buys Citizen. I think a lot of our anecdotes came more from vendors. And then we would go and look at the data and see if their assessment of the watch customer was in fact accurate. And in a lot of cases, they were right. And in a lot of cases, our customers told us something different.
Lesson 3: Amazon's working backwards is about seeking painful truths. Colin Bryar wrote the book on working backwards. He was Jeff Bezos' technical assistant way back at the beginning, and he talks about a similar topic as the last lesson: how negative feedback is actually a gift, not an attack. So, to truly work backwards from the customers and build something that customers will love, we need to actually start by seeking the negatives, the frustrations, the painful truths.
This next question from listeners asks, our Write a Lot principle states that leaders seek diverse perspectives and work to disconfirm their beliefs. Drawing from your time as Jeff's shadow, how did you see Jeff and other S team members apply this principle when making key decisions?
A lot of it is just looking at the data. So a weekly business review is a great example where if you were to look at that, flip through the deck that Amazon looked at for the weekly business review, about 80% of that data reflects what customers saw in the prior period. And so it's all about connecting to customers, and that would tell you what promises we missed. And so you'd have that data, but then you'd also have anecdotes, and where we had this thing called voice of the customer, voice of the seller. Some of those were pretty painful to read. You realized how we ruined a customer's day, and they would go through in gruesome detail. Companies can either treat that feedback, they can either ignore it or treat it as a gift where someone is telling you where you let them down. And so you can figure out, well, how do we make sure that never, ever happens again? So those are cases where the data does not lie in that case. And that if your anecdotes and data don't match up, you need to keep digging and peeling the layers until they do match up. So that happens quite often.
Lesson 4: you can earn trust even when it doesn't come natural. Justin Maynard was a director for Amazon Devices, and he shares something that is widely talked about at Amazon, and that is how the ability to earn someone's trust is usually seen as one of those leadership principles that cannot be taught. He shared that earning someone's trust can be as simple as just do what you said you would do. And also, he shared a very methodical way to think about creating a mechanism to earn trust. For those of us who don't consider ourselves people persons, this will come very handy. So take a look.
I often heard that this is the top leadership principle that surfaces as people move up in their career. And I definitely saw this to be true for myself and others as well. And so I think there's some truth to that. Or I've heard it said differently outside of Amazon, where some people say it's your IQ that really helps you in the first half of your career. But as you go along, it's your EQ, this emotional intelligence, that becomes more and more important and really helps you achieve those higher positions and levels and scope of influence later on in your career. So for me, if you fast forward a couple of years, I'd been promoted to senior manager. I'd moved to the Canada team where I had this full team under me. And I was also the country leader for our in-stock management function. And so this now required me to work with like dozens of other teams and influence their roadmap and do a lot of things that really relied on this earn trust leadership principle. And so again, I was still like, this didn't come naturally. And I was kind of struggling with, how do you do this? That sometimes it seems like the things you had to do to earn trust seems so impractical to me and not like aligned with how I thought about the world. So I went to our VP for advice about earn trust. Now, our VP at the time was a bit of a paradox to me, because on the one hand, he had this reputation for being really strong on earn trust. But on the other hand, he didn't seem like the type that was cut from that same cloth as those where earn trust just came naturally. So I was really interested in what he had to say, and I was not disappointed when I talked to him about it. So I asked him, just how do you think about earn trust? And his first reply to me, well, the first rule of earn trust is that you have to do what you say you're going to do. Now, the thing is, that seems obvious, but believe it or not, it was the most practical advice about earning trust that I remember hearing. But that's not all. He went on to share with me the system he had developed for himself to keep track of his commitments and staying on top of what was important to others in his sphere of influence. And this was like, I was like, oh, okay, wow. It's like a really practical system that you have for doing what you say you're going to do, which in his mind is the first rule of earned trust. He then went on to share with me his system of how he would do what I think of as earning trust at scale. And this just blew my mind, because one of the things at Amazon, we often talk about mechanisms. And a mechanism is just using a set of tools, processes, systems to consistently turn inputs into the outputs that you want. And so, as I mentioned, like up to this point, I'd always thought of this earned trust as like touchy-feely, has to come naturally. But here I was chatting with someone where it didn't come as naturally to them, but instead they had learned to use their analytical, methodical nature to create these mechanisms of earning trust. And so I learned that earned trust can be broken down, it can be analyzed, it can put into a process and a mechanism. And I learned that I could approach earned trust in my own unique way rather than trying to have to be like other people that I'm not. And that was a real inflection point for me of approaching earned trust from a really different perspective, where I feel like I made much bigger strides when I try to approach it in my own way. So, going back to your original question, can the ability to earn trust be learned? Absolutely. And I think you can do it in your own unique way of finding your strengths and finding a way to apply that to the earned trust leadership principle.
That's very interesting. Can you share a little bit more about what that system or mechanism entailed?
Yeah, this was really fascinating. So one of the things about earning trust is that people don't love to be surprised. They want to be kept in the loop. They want to know what's happening. And I can share like this specific example of, I went to meet with the tax guy for the Canada team. And he was so frustrated with the entire Canada team because he had been burned so many times where there'd be some new initiative and would spin this up, they'd go get Jeff B approval or whatever approval needed to be happen, and would march forward with this thing. And then a week before the launch, they would, oh, hey, has anybody talked to tax about this? There would all of a sudden be huge tax implications. And that was a real trust breaker for that tax team against whatever team had done that to them. So what our VP told me about is this process where when he had some big initiative that he was going to do, he would very purposefully try to get the most senior person that he could find to review this. And it might be Jeff Bezos, and say, we're going to do this review. And then what he would do is he would identify every stakeholder, every requirement that might be on this that needs to happen to make this project a success. And then he'd go and he'd meet with all of these teams one by one and say, here's this project. Here's what we're working on. Here's what we would need from you. Are you in or are you out? We're putting this together for this review. We just need to know what's going to go well, what's not going to go well. And so he'd go in with this document where he has now spoken with everybody. everybody has had the chance before it's been approved to go out and get the resources they need to be able to see if they have it, if they have any blockers, anything. And so by doing this now, everybody has full transparency, which I think transparency is one of those key things of earning trust. And so now this project, the likelihood of success has gone way up. So his likelihood of delivering is going to go up, which is a key element of delivering success. Do what you say you're going to do. And everybody's on board, and any of those problems can be addressed right at the very beginning. So he had used this time and time again. And when you talk to people, they just loved it. We went to this party for the Canada team, and I remember seeing the tax guy there, which was, he wasn't the happiest, most lively person. And here he is, walked up to our VP, shaking his head. How are you doing? It's so good to see you. And I'm like, what in the world? How did he make friends with him? But it's because he would have this system of identifying everybody who's important and not leaving anybody out, and then bringing them along. And the fact that he was at that party just shocked me. So he had to remember. So just a very analytical, methodical approach to making sure that everybody's in the loop, everybody knows what the deliverable is, everybody can be in or out on it.
Lesson 5. Sometimes the best solutions are the simplest. Dave Anderson is a former GM at Amazon, and he shares an anecdote about the beauty of focusing on what he calls the 10% that brings the 90%. And sometimes simple is beautiful. I mean, this is the Pareto law in motion. A simple, well executed idea often beats complex systems. And Dave shares a really nice example of this in the clip that's following now.
How do you see this applying to an individual employee or an individual contributor's perspective in terms of the things that they can be working on, or what's on their plate? How can this frugality principle apply at an individual level?
I think one of the best examples that I can come up with, because I think it's an interesting anecdote, and I'll say that I don't know if this is still the case, but I think it's interesting, is AWS, as you imagine, like just in general, imagine there's data centers scattered around the world. In each data center, there's tons of machines, EC2 specifically. There's thousands of machines and thousands of, hundreds of data centers, like they're all over the place. And knowing when there are issues, whether they're networking issues or hardware issues or whatever else, is a challenging problem. There are many, many solutions inside of Amazon. Let's just say there's like 12 teams at least that will notice within, let's say, an hour that a section of our network went down. The section of, part of EC2 went dark. The fastest detector for a while was a Perl script written by, I think it was originally an SDE1, like entry-level engineer, was a Perl script that was just distributed through cron and would just like essentially ping a bunch of other machines from other machines. And if it ever wasn't able to ping a machine, as in like just do a really quick like check on the machine, if it ever wasn't able to ping the machine, it just would quickly create an alarm, create a ticket. That was the fastest alarm in all of EC2, not the ones that were built by like 8 engineers that would watch and like triangulate data from whatever else and merge it over a period of whatever and average to something. Like, no. It's a Perl script that was written all of like, I don't know how many days it took to write, but I created conference calls with Andy Jassy and his staff repeatedly because of a Perl script kicking off an email or kicking off an alarm. And so I think that at an individual contributor level, what are you trying to accomplish? There are really pretty engineering solutions, and frequently the pretty engineering solutions, like when you think of pretty as like, oh, I love the design of that thing on the whiteboard, that takes a large amount of time, and maybe it's appropriate. I think a lot of times when you think about what am I really, really trying to accomplish, you can get 80, 90% of what you're looking for from wildly less work. Like, you're getting 90% of the solution mathematically from 10% of the work is obviously a really good ratio. And I think that a lot of engineers are focused on like, I want to build as pretty a solution as I can. So let me see what I can justify. Let me see what I can do. And I think the people who are successful in the long run are focused more on how do I get the majority of what we really need here? And maybe I can do it for really, really cheap. And that's what you see from a lot of the principles, in fact, sometimes is not just the coolest, biggest solutions they're doing.
Lesson 6. Having ownership over a business can take different levels. Nearly 4 years have passed since Ethan Evans appeared in episode 13 of the Think Like Amazon podcast. Since then, he has definitely grown into this well-known online figure outside of Amazon. In this episode, he discussed the concepts that many leaders at Amazon actually talk about, and that is the different levels of ownership. I actually had a manager who used to call it that there was big ownership and small ownership. So if you're in marketing, for instance, small ownership is to take care about your marketing metrics, even if you don't own them directly. But big ownership is to care about the business overall, the financials, the bottom line, the tax implications, how your actions can affect other locales, etc., etc., etc. So Ethan shares a really great story about taking care of your entire business.
Yeah. And so I think I've also seen that type of ownership on a longer term basis, not on a crisis basis. And the example I give there is to give you a long term example. When we were building the Amazon App Store, we, as is often common at Amazon, we started with a small, lean team. And then Amazon made the first Kindle tablet. And it sold really well. It came out right before Christmas and it sold really well. And our app store supported the app experience that let you add apps to your Kindle. And right after Christmas, or even maybe the week between Christmas and New Year, Jeff called a meeting and said, this is going really well. We need to start selling this all over the world. App Store, because we were US only at the time. By next Christmas, you need to be global. And we had this really small team. And blessing or curse, I've never been afraid of stating plainly what can't be done. And so I looked at the room of leaders and Jeff and I said, I can't do that. There is no physical way the team I have can build that. I'm sorry. And so Jeff's like, okay, well, that's pretty plain. He kind of looked at other people like, is this guy full of it? But when I got back up that no, that was not physics, wasn't going to work, he said, okay, what do you need? Well, the punchline to get to this is we needed 50 engineers. And he said, okay, go get them, meaning go out and name who you want from other teams and have them move to your team. Now, you can imagine, since you worked at Amazon, we were extremely unpopular when we started emailing other VPs and directors and saying, you have this pretty good engineer. His name's Fred Smith, or her name is, Sarah Jones. And we'd like to move her to our team for this project from Jeff. We were persona non grata. But absent one or two leaders across the company, we ended up with 55 people in 3 weeks. And I think that shows really the broad culture of Amazon ownership, that all of those leaders, though they gnashed their teeth and were very unhappy, and I don't blame them, coughed up some of their best people and filled our team out. And then you can imagine, our team got together and is like, we are dead men if we don't deliver. Because if we took all these people off other teams and we don't come through, they're going to ride us out of town on a rail, and I wouldn't blame them. So we had to deliver, and luckily we were able to.
Lesson 7, just saying yes to opportunities can make you lucky. We finish off with the same guest as we started. Ronak Patel has had the most viewed episodes, well, at least so far. So I wanted to include a couple of learnings from him. He says that just saying yes to opportunities makes you lucky. This made me think about the 4 types of luck. There is blind luck, which is what we traditionally refer to as being lucky. There's luck of motions, which come from action. There's luck of awareness, when you have so much knowledge on something that you can recognize opportunity. And then there is lack of unique, which is you have built such unique skill sets that you are lucky. And Ronak experienced lack of motion. Saying yes to opportunities is sometimes the best strategy to move forward,
especially if we're talking about delivering results over an extended period of time. So I truly focus on that one leadership principle and figured out, hey, if I can nail it, if I can deliver results in the current role I'm in, I'll be given other opportunities to do different things. So I talked about luck and fate and a little bit of hard work. And I think the two really worked out for me, where the building I was at was in Murfreesboro, Tennessee, ended up being one of the most successful launches in Amazon history in terms of how quickly it got to the productivity levels it was supposed to. Based on that, individuals reached out to me and said, hey, we need some help in our European fulfillment centers. And you clearly were running flow in this building, and you were one of the key reasons why this building was successful. I, once again, don't think that. I think the 60 plus leaders, but at the end of the day, a luck, fate, and a little bit of hard work worked out for me. And I got asked to go to Germany. I didn't know anything at the time. I think it's the first time I actually even visited Europe at that time. And there's a famous Dave Clark story out there where he didn't even have a passport and he went to Japan to go open up the first Japan location. And I was like, oh my God, this is like such a similar situation where I'm actually being asked to go to Germany to help teach and improve the productivity in those German fulfillment centers. Like, how can I not take this opportunity? So the opportunity was provided to me. I took it, and then similar opportunities kept coming up over time, and I never said no to those opportunities. There was definitely a few where I was like, do I really want to do this? But I ended up trusting my leaders and ended up taking care of me.
I really hope that you like these learnings. If you listened so far, don't forget to hit the bell and subscribe to this podcast. See you next time.